Hello, thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Wise Content Creates Wealth. You have heard that content is king, but wise content rules the world. This podcast is about understanding how you can make and utilize wise content to improve your marketing and financial success. I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, and I'm a marketing technology expert who has built a multi-million-dollar company, and I'm also an award-winning content producer. My company is Galileo Tech Media, a leader in providing wise content for SEO, content marketing, and digital PR. Our wise content is content that incorporates semantic science, behavioral science, AI, and data to make marketing and promotional content that is smart, that converts better, and gets better rankings. Galileo works with companies both big and small. Recently, we completed over 40,000 pieces of content for one big client in a year. And for another small client, we completed a handful of articles with dramatic increase for their e-commerce sales. Our agenda today is content experience. Today's guest is Mike Graham of CMO and Managing Director of Acronym, an international search and performance marketing agency based in NYC. Mike is an SEO pioneer, author, world traveler, and keynote speaker, champagne connoisseur, and a consummate drinking partner to the global digital marketing community. Hello, Mike. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. That was a great start. Anyway, it was a perfect description. And when I'm on mute, my wife says I've never sounded better.
It's sweet, sweet music to her ears.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, good to see you.
It's good to see you. So I read that your bio that you were a popular DJ in the UK before getting into digital marketing. That is quite a switch. Now, how did that happen? And did that first career help your second?
Wow. Yeah, you're taking me back some time. Yeah, I mean, I actually come from a kind of a showbiz kind of family. My father back in the day was the first manager of a band called The Animals, big band back in the 60s. So I was kind of surrounded by music, and long story short, I became a DJ, club DJ, and then eventually ended up working on radio. And it was great. I mean, that wasn't the course. I was actually, at university studying my business degree for marketing, and that's what I was going to do. But the draw of the microphone and sitting on the radio, became such a big attraction for me. So anyway, I spent 10 years working in radio and television, and it's still in my blood. Yeah.
Well, I guess that got you started early then on creating content, which is, sort of the world as it exists today now, right?
It's kind of interesting that you say that, because every time I have a conversation about content, and, it is like, content is king, as you said before. But without content, you have nothing. You have an empty channel. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes, when I hear the term content marketing, and I think for a publisher, content is not a tactical campaign. It's the product. That's what we've got. And yes, so I do go back and I say, what do you think I was doing when I was working in radio and television? People weren't tuning in just to hear the ads, you had to have content. So, when you work in radio and TV and you're doing this now, you're not just thinking about what's my next web page going to be? Could I make a 30-second video? You're thinking, what's the content going to be for the next 5 minutes, and then the next 5 minutes, and then the next 5 minutes, and it's in real time, So I learned a lot about content and developing content. And some of the things that we talk about now, we were doing back in the day. I mean, even back then, we would do stuff that was in vision, as it were, that was recorded, and yet you would still just use the audio track for radio and that kind of thing, and everything got transcribed. So kind of what I was doing back in the day in analog, I'm kind of doing the same thing in digital now,
Well, yeah, in the sense with podcasts is transcribed, and you cut up the video, you cut up the audio, you use the bits and pieces, you put it all over the place. I mean, once you do content, it's like, all right, now it becomes this entity that now can be used in a million different ways. So you in terms of creating content, it wasn't just your DJ career. You're also a writer of books. In fact, you wrote the first book on search engine optimization. I think it was called Search Engine Marketing Book, right? So one of my first guests, Jerry Ashton, had his company explode because he wrote a book, and it led to a segment on John Oliver's HBO. So boom, he was done. So I call that sort of analog world the tried and true wise content strategy of its time. So did that book have any major impact on your career and your company?
Absolutely, yeah, but not in the way that people tend to think. The interesting thing was I didn't set out to write a book. There was just so much bullshit. Oops, sorry. I hope, but
I think this is
that's
loud on this.
that's a technical term. Sorry, but there was just so much of this erroneous information back in the day that I thought I just wanted to put the record right. What I had done is I'd written 22 years ago, believe it or not, I'd written something about search engine positioning because search engine optimization hadn't been, or the term hadn't been invented then, and there was just like a handful of people, doing this thing with search engines. And I realized that there was stuff that you could do with HTML, and you could change the pages and keywords around. And, basically I spent a lot of time spamming early search engines before Google came around. But somebody who an engineer that worked at a search engine, sent me a note one day and said, I looked at your book and blah, blah, blah. But really, you need to read this. So he sent me a book about information retrieval, about the science of information retrieval. And I became hooked on that. And that's basically the underlying science of what happens at Google. And the more that I learned about that, the more I realized, the more you understand what it is that Google's trying to do, the better it is for you to create the content and make it easier for them to access that content. So yeah, it was actually the second book. It ended up just being called Search Engine Marketing because that term had just been coined and I wanted to own it, so I did. but it was basically a book about search engine optimization and the underlying science of information retrieval. How did it affect me? It affected me in many ways. It became such a big seller in a sense around the world. Not that you can, afford to buy a yacht and retire on the strength of a business book, but it was a first of its kind. The two things that happened, I actually created an ebook version of it, and people were saying, who's ever going to read an ebook on a monitor? And I was like, that's why it was great when the Kindle came around,
Yeah.
But so how did it affect me from a professional point of view? I'd always done some public speaking, and coming from a broadcast background, it wasn't something that was new to me, but I started getting invited to speak at conferences all over the world on the strength of the book, and I was traveling backwards and forwards so much to the US, I ended up just moving here. So yeah, even though you can tell by my not so native Brooklyn accent, I am actually based here. My office, as you mentioned before, in New York, my office is on the 65th floor of the Empire State Building.
Oh, it takes you places, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So it affected my career in the sense, but I've been living, eating, and breathing this industry from day one, and I've been very lucky in the sense that not only did I write that first book, that I became a regular feature at Search Engine Watch, which was the big first kind of website where the community could go and read about what was going on in the industry, and Click Z. And then eventually I ended up actually as the publisher of Search Engine Watch and Click Z, and running what was the largest search marketing conference, Search and Social, as it became, which was SES Conference and Expo. And then I became chairman of the Global Trade Association. So I'm sorry, it took up most of your show just doing my bio.
No, that's all right. I did want to talk about the reason I asked that is you're an author, and you were had great success as an author. But in 2013, you were interviewed by Andy Betts, right? And it was
yeah,
right.
And BrightEdge.
And he was asked you about content and authorship importance to SEO, and you said, getting back to authorship, I don't think it's actually to do with the guy that writes the piece and who has the most Twitter followers. I don't think it's about the number one writer in the industry, the number one blogger. I actually think it's more about the source, which is the author. I read a paper about years and years ago about information retrieval and citation analysis. After digging in deeper, what's apparent is that the source of where the publication is what is really matters. Do you think authorship is dying?
So just to get the context of what Andy and I were talking about then, I think that people thought this author tag that you could put it in there, that if you were a popular guy, that you would get better recognition with Google and you would get some better ranking. The point that I was making there is that it's not like, if you're Joseph Franklin McElroy and you've got your show going on and all of these followers on Twitter, that if the author tag says that it's you on that particular page, that Google's going to pay any attention to what your prominence is in social media. It's actually how many people are consuming the content that you create through Google itself, And then when you create this, what people know as an authority, in that first book I wrote explained what hubs and authorities were and what an authority was. And that's why linking is so important. So, you end up with the fact that, let's go back to Search Engine Watch. When I was publisher of Search Engine Watch, we had 300 authors. We had 300 people writing for Search Engine Watch, and they did remarkably well. They were great writers. But the reason that we did so well with Google is Search Engine Watch as a source was a recognized authority within the industry, So
so in a sense, the publication become the author.
Absolutely, and that's so the publication has prestige. And I did this experimenting with some of our top writers. I would say you write the post and publish it on your own blog, and then we'll publish it on Search Engine Watch and see what happens. And Search Engine Watch, they always got a better deal out of it being published at Search Engine Watch, and that's because of the authority, the reputation, and the trust. Most importantly, that the domains create for themselves online.
Okay, well, we have to take a break. So when we get back, we'll talk more about authority and expertise and all these other wonderful facts about search engine marketing.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you interested in having a better relationship with yourself, others, and God? Greetings. I'm your host, Dr. George Andow, for the show, A Journey Through into Awareness. On my show, we journey into the awareness that the mind of God is the true seat of our personal consciousness. We join together each Monday at 7 p.m., so tune in on Talk Radio NYC.
Did you know that nearly 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. battles mental illness? Hi, my name is Albert Daba. I'm the host of the show Extra Innings. Extra Innings, I discuss the topics of wellness, mental health, and the experience of surviving multiple suicides within my family. Listen live every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern to Extra Innings for discussions with sports figures, artists, mental health professionals, and many others. That's Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Graham Dobbin. Join me every Thursday evening for the Mind Behind Leadership here on talkradio.nyc. We speak to people from business, sport, military, and politics, all around what makes a great leader. The personal experiences of what's worked and, maybe more importantly, what hasn't worked. So that's 7 o'clock every Thursday evening, the Mind Behind Leadership here on talkradio.nyc. Listen to real stories of real leaders.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hi, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy back with the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast and my guest, Mike Graham. Hi, Mike.
Hello again.
Yes. So you sent me that video of your recent presentation to Sydney Search Summit, and I thought it was really fascinating video. And you were talking about the difference between structured and unstructured data, but you started out with your favorite topic, which is information retrieval. And you really made a point of explaining the difference between information retrieval and data retrieval. Can you explain that to our audience?
Yeah, I mean, structured data has become so important now in SEO, but the notion, the idea of it has been around for a long time, you know. But in order to be able to try and explain the difference between the World Wide Web, which is just a sea of unstructured data, you know, no two websites really are the same. Content is entirely different. It's very, very difficult to analyze unstructured data and try and make some sense of it. Google's been very good at doing that, you know. But to understand the difference between unstructured data and structured data, you really need to know the difference between information retrieval and data retrieval. So that's why I started there, because they're two entirely different things. So with information retrieval, just keeping it simple, information retrieval as a science is finding out about things. So, you know, one of the examples that I gave using keywords in that particular presentation was that if you typed the words fish tank at Google, yeah, if you only looked at the keywords and nothing else, and then looked for documents that had those two words, you would find some rusty old fish tank somewhere, which is probably not the best experience. What you wouldn't see is a tropical fish aquarium, which is probably what you're looking for. Maybe that's a beautiful video with tropical fish in it. So Google's become very good at using keyword expansion techniques to say and understanding intent. The guy said fish tank, but most people who type that actually really want to see a tropical fish aquarium, you know? So information retrieval is finding out about things, and that's why entities has become such a big deal in information retrieval. Whereas data retrieval is highly structured. And, you know, you've just got to think about your operating system, about Windows, or whether you're on a Mac. It's all about precise things being registered in certain places, being filed in certain places. And not only that, usually with data retrieval at a large scale, you're using serious programming languages. They're usually, you know, programmers that are retrieving data, and it is completely precise. So the major difference is that the unstructured data is finding out about things, and data retrieval is the exact specific thing, you know? And the reason that it's become so important is that, again, there is this pervasive thing that people assume that Google has access to everything on the World Wide Web. And yet the World Wide Web is absolutely massive, and it grows still exponentially every single day. It has since day one, you know? So even though Google had the best of intentions of crawling the World Wide Web and bringing the world's information together, they realized pretty soon that this was never going to happen, particularly with the protocol that they use. And I think I mentioned, you know, Google has seen like sub-X trillion URLs. If they tried to crawl them all, it would take so long, we'd all be dead by the time they got to the last one. So what's that got to do with structured data? I mentioned that the notion of this has been around for a long time, that Google continues to crawl the web, crawl the most popular areas where the most popular content is. And that's the important thing. Google doesn't like to return content following a query if people don't want to see it. And they can tell if you don't click on it, or if you don't like the page, those kind of things, you know? So they're good at maintaining a fresh index, trying to bring fresh content in at the same time. But if we were able to send data directly to them in a structured fashion to say something has changed here, then it makes their job a lot easier. So if you look at the way that we're using structured data now, it's not just, you know, some of the primary examples that Google uses are like if you have a website that does recipes, you know, if you use structured data, when people do a search for cookie recipes, then instead of just seeing a link to go to the website, you'll see at the top of the page, these are the cookies, here's the recipe, this is what it contains, this is good for you, this is bad for you, those kind of things. But they've also reached the point now with websites that are promoting events and a lot of things that are happening live, so that you could put times and dates in. So you create the content, the unstructured data, and then you augment that with the structured data, saying we're open now, we're closed now, the concert starts at this time, the show starts at this time, these kind of things. So I think it's going to be very important for SEOs. And one of the areas that we'll touch on is, the term SEO, about search engine optimization. I'm not saying that's dead, it's going away, but the job itself is changing much more to understanding more about the content and actually creating the content. So understanding the unstructured data as a content creator, and also how to feed structured data as a content creator, is becoming very important.
So, you're touching on this, but it's all about experience. And I think you started with the page experience, right, is pretty important now, right?
Well, it's kind of interesting that Google's having this update, and they've talked a while about the idea of page experience. But again, and I have to keep repeating this over and over again. If you study information retrieval, if you study that science, it's something that academically, the idea of this has been around for quite some time. A lot has been learned in, if I take a step back and say, before you had paid search, for instance, before that started, Google had already learned, search engines had already learned a great deal about end user behavior, just looking at the organic listings, on what content people liked or didn't like. There's just so much that they could learn through the analytics. And then when they started doing paid search, they started applying some of that to the ads. Which ads do people like? Which ads do they not like? Which is why you got what they call a quality score in paid search. So what they're doing now with page experience is pretty much a similar kind of thing, is bringing it back to the organic side and saying there are certain elements that need to be on this page. There's certain aspects of the way that you create the content, the way that the content is distributed, and also how does the content apply to the intent of the searcher in the first place, So when they talk about page experience, that was nothing new to me. As I said, just a little while earlier, there was a period in time that you could do on-page optimization, and I could beat your page by tweaking a few tags and things. That doesn't work anymore. At the end of the day, Google is looking at who is consuming, who's looking at your web page, who's reading it, who's looking at your sports scores, who's looking at your 30-second video, who's reading your 150-page PDF document, whatever it is, and then understanding the intent. So I think you have to, we reach a point now where I talk more about the content experience analyst. At which point on the user journey is the best experience going to be? And the experience is not about engagement. How long do I engage with the content? As I've mentioned many times before, if you're the Weather Channel and somebody says, what's the weather in New York? Oh, it's like 15 degrees or something, to whatever it is. That's 0.8 of a second. To a lot of people, that would be a bounce on a page. To the Weather Channel, that's a great result,
Mm-hmm. So somebody listening that, that maybe has a little bit of digital savviness, but doesn't know a lot about it, would the concept of EAT, and you mentioned this in your presentation, experience, expertise, authority, and trust, be a good approach to for them to try to to make their content have better experiences for their audience?
So again, it sounds like a broken record, but the EAT acronym that has come around, it's good. Google Quality Raters is there are, I don't know if people know this, Google does mostly everything by automation, but they have thousands and thousands of quality raters, people who are employed in the gig economy mainly, with a guidebook, just to go and have a look at Google's, just have human eyes on Google's results and make sure that the machine is getting it right, that people are getting the right kind of experience. And one of the best ways to explain something that's been around in information retrieval science for a long time was to use that acronym. So they came up with EAT, which was experience, authority, and trust. And what I was saying in that presentation for Australia is that you really have to have those in place. That's the unstructured data, really. You need to have that in place before the structured data is going to kick in. So the experience part of it, when you look at the page, is down to, are you an expert in the field? So this is an interesting thing when you're creating content, because people say, you have to write like an expert. And then people go, wow, like I have to be Einstein. No, you just have to know your own stuff. That's it. That's the whole point. And I think, when people talk about expertise and authority and trust, and it's like, holy, I have to go through this like ritual of stuff. And basically it's about understanding your audience. What does the audience want to hear? And are you credible? So the stuff that you write on your web page or you create in your video or whichever way you choose to present the content, people have to know, well, this guy knows his stuff. I really enjoy reading it. And whether it's, nonfiction or fiction, whatever it is, the whole point of getting the authority, and that word has been around for a long time. And again, I explained this, is you can't get authority by just writing on a page, I'm an expert, so read my stuff and you'll discover I'm an expert. Anybody can write anything on a web page and say anything about themselves. But in order to be an expert, that is something that's usually bestowed upon you. You earn that credibility kind of thing. And in the first instance, when you're creating content for your website, you earn the credibility by other people with other websites who link to you. When Joseph, when you write something for your website at Galileo Tech, and I'm a guy in the industry and I go, wow, that's really cool. So I link to you. What I'm saying is I give a vote to your content. And the more people that give you that vote, the more it becomes obvious that you do have authority, that you are recognized in your industry, But the trust factor, the final part, the trust factor is what I was saying. That's the end user data. You created, I'm the expert. I wrote some great stuff about wise content. Mike's linking to me. Other people are linking to me. Now, Google's actually paying attention to this, but what it's going to pay more attention to is who's consuming it, who's reading it. And if it becomes with the hit with the end user, again, your trust for that domain is building all of the time as that domain being a good resource for trustworthy content, All
right, thanks. So I think it's important. We're going to take a break now and then come back and continue talking about structured data and decorating the results.
Cool.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Do you run or are ready to open your own business? Hi, I'm Jeremiah Fox. I've been operating and opening small business for the last 25 years, and I'm the host of the new show, The Entrepreneurial Web. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time for insights and stories on the nuances of running small business right here on Fridays at noon, talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Wise Content Creates Wealth. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Friday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 2. They say content is king. Well, wise content rules the world. Every episode features tools and tips for content marketing and business people telling the wise content stories of that success. Tune in every Friday from 1 p.m. to 2 on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hi, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy, back with Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast with my guest, Mike Graham. So Mike, we talked about structured data and you give us, I think, a pretty good description of it. What are ways that are the most important ways for people to use structured data on their web pages? And what does it mean that it's Google calls it decorating the results?
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat more harder to discuss the structured data aspect without getting deep in the weeds. I'll try and keep it as simple as I can, I mean, when you're creating a web page and you're creating a WordPress website, you don't really know what's going underneath, so people without technical experience, usually with, WordPress and templates and that kind of thing can create the content. There's a little bit more involved when it comes down to the structured data and actually being able to put it in there. But like I said before, it's kind of an extra signal to Google to let them know much more about what your content is about, giving a better indication that this website really is about cookies and it's not the ones that follow you around on the web. It's the ones the kids love to eat. And these are the ingredients that go in it, So it's a much better way of being able to give a strong signal to Google. I mean, in terms of how you put it there, like I say, from a technical point of view, there are tags that you can inject the data into your existing HTML, and basically it needs to go on the page. So I think for anybody who wants to do it themselves, and you can do, I mean, you can learn to do that, then you need to go to schema.org, which is the general all-purpose website to do with structured data, and to be perfectly honest, Google they've become very open about the better effect that you can have, the better experience that you can create for the end user by using structured data. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, they do actually use the word decorate. So what does that mean? When I first started in this industry, you would go to a search engine, and there were quite a few before Google. But let's just say, when Google started, you would do a search, you would get 10 blue links. And that was it. And you would decide which one to click on. And one of them might have something you're interested in, and the rest of it might be terrible, It took a little while. And then, of course, what happened is you got what was called universal search. And then eventually the results started to look different because they had, images and news results and video and that kind of thing. What they've been able to do with structured data, understanding more about the content and the source, is to give it more prominence. So when they call it decorated, that means, when you do a search and you look at the top of the results page at Google, and there's a carousel with all of these images going around, that's being driven by the structured data, by the images that you've supplied and what they know. When you end up in the knowledge box, when you're answering a question and that turns up at the very top. So all of this information that you can provide that helps, when they talk about what's known as the knowledge graph, which is these entities around the world. So if you're searching for people and places and events and those kind of things, you get those better results because they literally are better decorated. They're more prominent. There are more images in there. They will use your logo. It was interesting to hear one of Google's engineers saying recently that when they were looking at structured data, sometimes one of the problems that companies have is they don't supply a good quality logo. And for me, when I was hearing that, I was like, years ago, we were trying to force you to show our logo, and now you're asking for a better quality version of it. But yeah, so being decorated is just kind of looking at the top of the page and those results that are somewhat more prominent, that's being driven by the structured data.
So, I mean, the way they make it sounds like, they want it to be, about enhancing the results. Do you think it actually helps the rankings? You used EAT as an example, that you got to do everything right beforehand. But I'm wondering, I'm starting to see anecdotal, and we've done some testing, that some things that you do in structured data actually enhance your search engine positions. What do you think about that?
It's kind of this mutually reinforcing thing, I mean, I'll stick to what I was saying before, the methodology, because I've used it for so long, is that if you get the EAT part right, the unstructured data part right, if your website is actually building up a good reputation, that you're creating good content, then Google will reward you with the structured data. If Google can see, well, people like this, we can present that better in the search engine results page. And then what happens then is you attract more clicks, you get more engagement with your content. And the more engagement that you get, the more that Google realizes this is, it's implicit signal to Google that people enjoy this content. So the more content you create, the better you get decorated. The better you get decorated, the more engagement that you get, So it is a mutually reinforcing thing. But just to be clear, and you and I could arm wrestle over this if you want.
All right.
That if you don't actually, you couldn't take a new website, create some content that's kind of okay, and then inject structured data into it.
No, that wouldn't work.
It's gonna rank,
No, I agree with you there, but I'm wondering if you have a decent site, and you do things like, entities, I think, like you've mentioned several times here, are becoming really important, I think, and more and so, and they sort of have a authority that the search engines have given them, even to the point where, particular phrases sort of have an entity, all right? And it's like, if you search for, a particular, phrase, way to describe something, coffee, or, or whatever, coffee, brand or coffee type, or I'm not using a great example here, but essentially they have an entity they say is the way that this is mostly referred to, right? As opposed to it's not. So pizza is an entity, and it means that people are looking for pizza delivery, right? So it's got sort of a pseudo entity. But anyway, the thing I'm thinking is that entities, and anecdotally, I don't have a lot of proof of this, but if you do things like same as in your content and you got a good site, it seems that where there's a schema that says same as, that points authority that to something else, that another entity that's authority. And I think that helps. And what do you think? Do you think that is possible?
So again, the terms become interchangeable. We talk about structured data and schema, but originally the idea for what Google is trying to create as this second layer on top of the unstructured data was coined by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who was the guy who invented the World Wide Web, and he called it the semantic web. So if you take a look and see what semantic web is, like this overarching term where you get structured data and schema and all of those other things underneath. And instead of looking at the data, what Google says, instead of looking at strings of data, we look at things. So they say things, not strings. So what are things? People, places, events, those kind of things that all link together. So I think once you are involved in creating information around an entity, then it does become part of this semantic web. It's kind of like, what I was saying before about linking, one thing leads to another. So there is a natural effect there. I just want to keep going back to the fact that that you have to think through, what is it that my audience wants, and understand the content and the experience that somebody is looking for. So without going too far at a tangent, there is a big difference in the search engine results between ranking and sorting. Okay, these are two different things. Okay, so as I said before, when we moved beyond the 10 blue links and we went into universal with different types of results in there, if you take a look at those results, you can't say if Joseph has a video at number 6 and I'm at number 7 with a web page, can you get the SEO guy to make my web page get higher than his video? No. you can only rank pages against pages and videos against videos. It's an apple and oranges thing. So what I have to do is create a better video than Joseph. That's the whole point. So understanding the content experience, that for that particular keyword or phrase, you're doing better with a video than I am with a web page, then it says that the end user prefers the video result than the web page. So now I have to create the video to go with it. So that's why I keep talking about creating the experience that goes with it. Yeah.
So you say that that us SEOs now got to start changing to be called content experience analysts. Well, you think that's happening now, right? And what do you think the job will be?
I mean, it does. So if you just go back to the very early days, like I say, I mean, I was in at the very, very beginning, and I was never a fan of the idea of this thing, search engine optimization. I never liked because I've been in the industry this long. I never met anybody who's optimized a search engine. So why do they call us search engine optimizers? I just don't get it. I mean, what we actually do from day one is optimize content for Google. We're content optimizers. That's what we do. But we don't optimize search engines. It's always been about the content. That's the whole thing. But I honestly do think now that when you understand intent and the queries that people use, particularly on a commercial level. So what we talk about is the customer journey. Yeah, the customer doesn't wake up in the morning with a credit card going, I've got a credit card, I'm going to buy something, and go straight to the checkout. Yeah, it usually starts informational, then it goes navigational, and then it becomes transactional. So creating the content around the intent so that at the informational stage, I see a different thing when it comes to the navigational thing, and that you're not always trying to sell me something. One of my other, kind of top phrases is stop selling, start helping. So is it going to change? I think some of the technical stuff that SEO was really based on, because the crawler was a bit of a stupid piece of software back in the day. Crawling is much smarter. So we don't have to spend so much time looking at, the technical issues with, is my content being crawled and indexed? Google actually gives you a lot of tips about that. At the end of the day, it's more about, am I creating content that creates the right experience that moves people along the line from this informational stage to the checkout, to the transaction,
I think I agree with you 100% on that. That's why I've been focusing on wise content, as
absolutely
where we're going. So we'll come back. I'll have a couple of little business questions for you, and then I'll be wrapping up with some shout outs. All right.
All right.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who will expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Do you love or are you intrigued about New York City and its neighborhoods? I'm Jeff Goodman, host of Rediscovering New York, a weekly show that showcases New York's history and its extraordinary neighborhoods. Every Tuesday live at 7 p.m., we focus on a particular neighborhood and explore its history, its vibe, its feel, and its energy. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy back with Wise Content Creates Wealth, podcast, and my guest Mike Grehan. So, Mike, we were discussing how we traditionally didn't sell to the C-suite who didn't know what SEO is, but it's starting to have this last year. The pandemic has brought up the importance of being in the organic results. What do you tell a CEO who asks, "What is SEO?"
Yeah, there's a good question. I usually say, read a book, and I know a guy who wrote one. To be perfectly honest, I think, CEOs, certainly CMOs with the larger brands, larger companies, these enterprise level companies, understand kind of the basics of what SEO is, in the sense that it's doing stuff with content to get found on search engines to do a better job. I think the hardest thing is trying to explain the value, because like everybody else in the C-suite, usually if you say it's worth doing this, there's a dollar sign next to it, and it's very difficult for them to put a dollar sign next to SEO, because there are a number of conversations that I've had with the CEO or the CMO, and I talk about organic content and the way it's listed at Google, and they go, yeah, but Google just sends you that for free, don't they? And I'm like, no, that's not how it works, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, just to sum up what you were saying in a last chat, obviously last year was a difficult year for so many people. But the interesting thing is, not that anybody was prepared for a pandemic, but it was how many of the larger brands were so unprepared to go e-commerce, to go online. I mean, many of the world's major brands are still making most of their revenue offline. And then what they get online is kind of like a nice little bonus that goes with it. And then when the pandemic comes around and your offline business goes, man, you've got to start and think really quickly, what am I going to do now? And one of the things that I noticed was a lot of the smaller businesses and low-tech companies, not high-tech companies, the low-tech companies were much better prepared for e-commerce and online than some of the larger companies. So what we see this year is that the CEO and the CMO both fully appreciate the fact that they weren't ready for what happened last year. So to be better prepared, they're putting more money into SEO. So, God bless the CEO and sometimes the CMO if it's not your area of business, but at least they're prepared to put some more money into it. So this is going to be a big year for a few reasons, yeah. And certainly one of them is that SEO is getting a bit more attention, and the structured data thing. I think people can understand that a little bit more. So yeah, good year.
Yeah, I agree. So I think structured data, I consider that part of the content. Right. I think, like we're talking about data, and it's part of Wise content.
Absolutely. As I said before, I can't emphasize enough that going forward that, Google's been very good at training the industry to do what Google wants it to do. Yeah. They've become very good at doing that and diverting you away from things that they don't want you to do. But, in that presentation that we've been talking about, you see in the two of the engineers, Google engineers, that were featured in that, and the way that they were talking about, again, without getting deep in the weeds, that if you get the structured data on your web page right, if you get the schema right on the web page, they'll actually pull that data, the structured data, and put it straight into Google Assistant.
Mm-hmm.
So
the voice search works. Boom! Wow.
Voice search, exactly. So not only do I go to your web page and see it's better decorated because it has, all of the ingredients for the cookies that you're making, that, when your wife or one of the kids is in the kitchen making the cookies, they're talking to Google, and Google is actually speaking and giving the instructions for the recipe back, So that's why it's a big deal.
And speaking to the CEOs out there, if you're a B2B company, if you're not doing FAQ schema on your websites, you are missing the boat already.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about what's up next for you. What's Acronym doing? And then where people can connect with you.
Hey, yeah, I mean, Acronym. It's interesting. Like I say, we've got this beautiful headquarters on the 65th floor of the Empire State Building with these beautiful views, and nobody's been there for a year. It's been, we like yourself, we were very big in the hospitality, travel space. Our clients, some of them got hit very badly with that. One of our clients was the other way around, as I've mentioned before. We work with, fortunately, fabulous company, Scott's Miracle-Gro. And during the pandemic, people go gardening a lot. So that worked out well for us. I think probably the major transformation is something that you can see industry-wide. And whether you like it or not, you'll tend to follow this. And that is that people talk much more about performance marketing as a kind of sector, middle sector between being the search marketing company and the full service digital agency. There's this performance marketing bracket in between. So we have broadened, even though we've been around doing SEO 25 years, I mean, a long time. We've broadened out our range of services. So, certainly we're recognized now as a leading performance marketing agency. So are we doing SEO and paid search? Yes, we are. Are we doing social media? Yes, we are. Are we doing programmatic? Yes, we are. We're doing it all,
Cool. And you got another book or anything coming out?
I sit around, I've got manuscripts for 3, 2 of which are about, one of them's about search, the other one's more about digital marketing, and the third one is X-rated. We can't talk about that, but that's the one that most people want to talk about, though.
Right, yeah.
But that's about my days in rock and roll when I worked in radio.
Okay.
But
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, but so I keep going back to these manuscripts, but certainly by the end of this year, yes, there will be a new book.
Well, good. I want you to come back and tell us about it when you have
Absolutely.
it out there. How do people connect with you if they want to, ask you questions or something?
Just Google me. You can find me.
All right. There you go. You're all over the place.
I am.
Well, thank you so much.
Like my father said, like horse shit.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. We've been known each other for a while now, and it's good to have a conversation recorded.
Thanks very much for inviting me, Joseph. Thanks very much.
Cool. So everybody out there, I want to tell you about the tool tip of the day, and Mike knows a lot about this tool as well. It's called BrightEdge. This is for the enterprise. It's not so much for the small companies, but it's a global leader in enterprise organic growth, search and content, and it's powered by very deep learning engines. And it classifies the search engine result by category, layout, and intent. And since 84% of keywords have featured snippets and 25% of keywords include quick answers, it's imperative for marketers to understand each SERP and how it affects traffic and performance. If you are using BrightEdge, you are an AI marketer. Okay, instead of getting hundreds of recommendations, you get really smart recommendations on what you should do for your content. BrightEdge believes in smart content, which I call wise content, which blends the best of search marketing, artificial intelligence, and content marketing to power the development, activation, and optimization of high-performing content. It is the heart of modern marketing and will fuel modern marketing going forward. Content is self-aware and self-adjusting. Improving content and discovery and engagement is important. All right, go check out BrightEdge. All right, so a few shout outs. I'm on the talkradio.nyc network. So I want you to check out Jeremiah Fox, comes to the show before me, the Entrepreneurial Web. You want to find out more about this podcast, go to wisecontentcreateswealth.com. And don't forget to look at my company, GalileoTechMedia.com. We're specialists in creating wise content for marketing and for companies that need to get great results in the search engines. And I appreciate you. Next week, we'll have another great show, and we'll have some great guests. And check out my other podcast, Gateway to the Smokies, on Tuesday from 1 to 2 on talkradio.nyc. Bye.
You're listening to Talk Radio.